Welcome to the broadcast. I'm just waiting one quick moment. I think we're good to go, but I believe we're on and ready to go. So, welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for joining. Hopefully, we have a good number of Global Real Estate School students on tonight from South Dakota and Missouri. My name's John Mayfield. I'm your school administrator and your instructor, and try to do these study sessions at least weekly. Or let me back that up. I'm trying to do them weekly, but at least every other week, unless my travel schedule gets a little bit crazy. But again, thanks for joining. I am recording this, and I will put this in your study sessions library. For those of you in Missouri, you have a course library module, or a module in your course library entitled Study Sessions. And South Dakota, you have a South Dakota study sessions because you're watching some of the study sessions that are already that I've already completed. It's actually interesting because I was talking to Doug Nelson and many of the other students in South Dakota, and the pass rates are just really off the chart. They're doing very well there, and so I'm excited about that. But you have many more hours of school that you have to complete, so you have to watch all of the previous study sessions that I've done for all of the course modules. So those of you in Missouri, our pass rates are, it's not just mine, it's the whole state in general, just seems to be very, very low. There's some problems, I think, with the testing provider. We are hoping to move over to the same testing. I shouldn't say that because I have no idea, but let's just say we hope they move to a different testing provider because right now it's just not turning out very well at all. And so, but we are having people that are passed. Don't panic, but you really have to know the material and you have to study it good. And I know in the modules, a lot of times I talk about don't panic or worry about the math, but there is math on the exam, so we're going to go over some math tonight. And by the way, several of the study sessions that we have gone through are on math, so if you're having difficulty with the math, don't forget, go out, look at the study sessions that are there for you, and watch some of those where we go through some of the math problems. I think they will help you a lot. Okay, so I'm going to take off this little item, and I'm going to put my little live study session with Global Real Estate School on, so we have that. We have the board up, and I've fixed some lighting today, so I think it looks much better. We had some hot spots on the board, so I've been fixing that and hoping that that's going to work out a lot better for us tonight. So what I want to do this evening, and by the way, I should have brought my phone down so that you could text me questions. Unfortunately, with the YouTube live stream, I cannot see your questions unless I log into another device. So we could take a short break in between. I can go grab my phone and put my phone number up if you need to text me, or you could just email me after the course or during the class, and I'll get back with you with those questions as well. So tonight what I thought we would do is go over chapter 3, just a little bit of chapter 3. We've got several new students on, so I want to welcome you. Don't panic if you haven't gotten to chapter 3. It'll be good for you to go over that. If you've already gone through chapter 3, this is going to be good review for you because there's some good material. And then after we get finished with chapter 3, I have some sample test questions I'm going to bring up that we'll take a look at and go over, and then I thought we'd work maybe a math problem or two. So sit back. Hopefully you have a cup of coffee and your notes and a notebook, or I don't care if you want to drink a glass of wine, you can do that too, or a beer, whatever. Just enjoy the study session, sit back, relax, and I'll try to go through some of this for you. So I'm going to jump over here to the, oops. Take that off. There we go. Okay. By the way, is we have some severe thunderstorms through till about 2 a.m. If for some reason we lose power, I apologize, but if you hear some loud noises, it's not my dog jumping on the couch or anything upstairs, or my wife being upset. She was actually going to leave for a little bit and run to Walmart. We both saw how dark the clouds were out there, and she said, "I'm staying home." So um, we do have a lot of heavy thunderstorms that are going on, so apologize about that. So I'm going to, let's take a look at chapter 3 here, just go through a few items. I'll come back in and now and then and kind of reiterate a few things. But this is on, this is a chapter that you need to know the material. They love to ask questions about estates in land. And, the first question I ask you is, what is an estate? And you need to understand that an estate is really just an interest in land. And what's interesting about real estate, you find all different types of interests that you can have in land. I was very fortunate just a couple of weeks ago to teach for 11 days in Hawaii on a couple of different islands, and I love going over there to teach. And it's one of the cool benefits that I've had of being in real estate for as many years as I have. I love education. I love to train and teach. And so I'm in Hawaii for 11 days. And one thing that you learn in Hawaii is not everyone gets ownership interest in land. In other words, sometimes when you buy a home, you're actually getting what's called a leasehold estate. You do not purchase the land. Now, that's not in every place in Hawaii, but in many places, you're just actually leasing the land. I mean, you buy the home, but the land itself is owned by someone else, and you're just getting a long-term lease for that property. So a lot of times in Hawaii, it's interesting. If you go out to Zillow or any of the internet portals, go to Hawaii and just look, and you'll see where they will say fee simple title or no fee simple. In other words, if you get fee simple, which we learn in this chapter 3, fee simple is the highest type of ownership you can have, right? No one can tell you what to do with your real estate except for Uncle Pete, right? We'll talk about that as we get further on into the material in chapter 20. And Uncle Pete is just an acronym that stands for police power, the government's right to put building codes and zoning ordinances, right? Police power. Eminent domain, which is the government's right to take private property for public use. We have taxation, that's P-E-T-E, and we have eminent domain, or the last one, pardon me, is escheat, which is when you die without any heirs and no will, and you own real estate. The state actually gets your property in that situation. So fee simple, best type of ownership interest you can have. No one can tell you what to do with your property except for Uncle Pete, and except for any type of restrictions or other type of encumbrances that might be placed on the property, like an easement or again, restrictions as we discussed and so forth. So in chapter 3, we're going to go back over here. We're talking about an estate or an estate in land. And we use the word interest because it not only applies to those who have an ownership interest, but those who have a leasehold interest as well. Now, I am getting ready to go through and totally revamp the textbook. I find a lot of people want to have the textbook. I love to type, and my secretary from several years ago had typed this, and I noticed she loved to put the commas on the outside of the quotations, which they should be on the inside. Things like that kind of bother me because I want to be a little bit more precise, but I'm going to kind of revamp this, but I want you to understand interest not only applies to ownership, but it applies to leasehold, okay? So an estate can be what we call a freehold estate. And I want you to write your notes, freehold estate, that's ownership interest. And there's also what we call non-freehold estate. And that's an example of a lease, okay? Again, they're both estates and they're both interest. Because whether you purchase real estate or you lease real estate, you actually have an interest in that property. And so we call that an estate. It could be a freehold estate or a non-freehold estate. And don't let that confuse you on the exam. Just understand that an estate is an interest, and whether I own property or I lease property, I have an interest in that property. And because I have an interest, I have some legal rights as an owner and as a tenant, which is really cool. So let's go back over to the material and see here that that it says for an estate to exist. I'm right here, okay? So for an estate to exist, the interest must be one that can be measured in terms of duration. It must also be one that is or can become possessive. Now, don't let that confuse you. All we're just saying, all I want you to remember here, if you have this printed out or if you're taking notes, is John said, just understand for the exam that whether I own property or rent property, I have an interest. And that interest is also called an estate. And John says freehold estates is ownership, best type of, it's when you own property, freehold. Non-freehold should be able to connect the non-freehold. You don't own, right? It's non-freehold, but you do have an interest. You're a renter, you're a tenant. So just keep that in mind. So I wouldn't worry about that sentence too much. We'll kind of clean that up in the new textbook. So one example of an estate is when you buy or purchase real estate. And notice, I would highlight that this is an example of a freehold estate, okay? Right there. That's what you need to know. When you buy or purchase real estate, you have a freehold estate. Now, when you lease, see that here? You have what? Non-freehold estate, okay? So again, just understand whether you purchase or lease, you have an estate and you have an interest in that real property. Whether you're a tenant or an owner or landlord or tenant, owner, you have an interest in that property. So again, let's say it together. Freehold estate, ownership interest. Non-freehold estate, you're leasing property, okay? Freehold, ownership, non-freehold, leasing. Good. All right. So let's go on down. This is actually a short chapter too, so it's not going to take us a whole lot it's not going to take us very long to go through this. We might even go through chapter 4, which would be good for us as well. So fee simple estate, this is the highest form of ownership a person can have right there. I would highlight that or write that down, because that is probably a test question that's going to be worded really weird or goofy. But what you need to understand is that if a person has a fee simple estate in real estate, it's the highest form of ownership interest they can have, okay? Now, and again, I just remind you about Uncle Pete here. We'll deal with that in chapter 20, but Pete, P-E-T-E, is an acronym. Each letter represents a word. Police power. It's the government's right to tell you what you can and can't do with your property, normally done on a local or a county level. And those would be things like zoning ordinances. You can't have a commercial business in your house, right? Because you're in a residential neighborhood. So zoning ordinances, building codes would all fall under police power. Eminent domain is when the government takes your property, private property, for public use. Now, there is a test question, and we'll talk about this in chapter 20, but it's great for you to write it down now and remember this. Eminent domain is when the government takes private property for public use. Condemnation is the process, okay? They condemn your property. The process of eminent domain is called condemnation. They love to ask that question on the test. So you got to kind of remember the difference and really pick that out of the question. And three things have to be met for this. It has to be for the good of the public, okay? Sometimes cities are notorious for, they did this in St. Louis. They took an area that was kind of not a real good area and wanted to put the Edward Jones Dome there, the Rams football, which I was a season ticket holder, a PSL owner, and they go and move to Los Angeles, so my PSL tickets go out the door. But the government says we can take this property because we think it's for the good of the public, the tax revenue and everything off of the St. Louis Rams. Well, that's a whole nother story if we want to debate whether that really worked out to the good of the public, but has to be for the good of the public, has to be just compensation. They have to pay you a good fee. And it also, the third thing that has to happen is due process of law. So they can't just come in, take your property, and do it overnight. You have a right to appeal and go through the legal court process for that. So we have police power, eminent domain. Remember the process of eminent domain's condemnation. Three things you gotta know about: good of the public, just compensation, and due process of law. Taxation, the government's right to tax your property. And then escheat, E-S-C-H-E-A-T, that's when you die without any heirs and without a will. The government's going to get your property. Hey, a lot of times people ask me, they're really worried about the math or different things. I remember when I used to teach real estate classes at the college. This is back in the days when I had an overhead, and I had this really wild overhead that I would put on the projector that had this very complicated, complex calculus math formula. And I would say, okay, we're going to do some real estate math tonight, and everybody's eyes would get really big. And there's nothing like that on the test, but there's just a lot of material, a lot of definitions. So you got to know the definitions. And here's something I want to mention to you. I just listened to this this week in a book I'm listening to right now called Start With Why. It's a great book. And he was talking about, and there have been studies on this, about how there's a part of your brain that's connected kind of with your feeling. And this only really works if you're studying hard. But he was talking about the scientific proof that normally your gut feeling is generally the best answer. And sometimes we're very bad about over-rationalizing and overthinking something, and then we normally get it wrong because we thought about it for too long. And I thought about that with the real estate examination. I had one of my students, she made a 69 on the national, and you have to have a 70. She did go back a second time, passed it with no problem. But, I had to ask myself, could she have changed some answers? And really, I'm going to put a video in toward the end of the material, and I might use this piece right here. When you're taking that test and you read a question and your gut feeling is saying, I really believe it's B, you need to probably go with B. Don't sit there and over rationalize and change the answer. I mean, if you read it and your gut feeling is giving you an answer, that's probably the best answer. Now, this is in a situation when you have no idea and you're narrowing it down to 2 or 3 choices, but your gut feeling's just saying, you know, man, John, I really think B's the answer. That's probably the answer you need to go with, okay? Now, that only applies if you study very hard. If you're not studying very hard, then throw that out the window. That's not even going to apply. But that would never happen with a global real estate school student, right? All of our students are going to study very hard. So don't forget, you probably ought to go with your gut feeling, okay? And there's scientific proof to back that up. So there's a lot of material, and just keep that in mind. So let's go back over right now to our handout here, and remember that fee simple, highest form of ownership. Now, in the material, and I'm going to probably maybe just have a brief mention of this. I don't think I would really try to study this too much for the exam. I may even pull the flashcards out. I don't think they're asking any questions. If you'll just remember this piece right here, fee simple to feasible, it is limited to the occurrence of an event, okay? So just remember that we have fee simple and fee simple to feasible. Fee simple is the highest form of ownership. Nobody can tell you what to do with it except for Uncle Pete. Fee simple to feasible means it's limited to an occurrence of an event. And I think if they ask you a question on the test, it'll come from this right here, okay? I don't think you're going to get down into these 2 different types of a condition subsequent or a fee determinable. I mean, it's okay to know those, but I really think if you know fee simple to feasible, you're fine, okay? So I'm just going to go right past that information there. Fee tail, again, I've not seen any questions on that. I wouldn't get too wrapped up on that. It has to do with really the descendants when people die out and who gets what, but I haven't seen a question on that. Now, life estate, yes, we need to know a little bit about life estate. So I'm going to go up to the board now, and I'm going to draw some information here because I'd like for you to be familiar with a life estate and how this works. First of all, a lot of times people ask me, why would someone want to do a life estate, or what's the reason or the rationale behind a life estate? And you'll see this a lot with elderly people who might want to try to avoid probate or different types of ways to allow a child to have a property if something happens to them. Today, we really see the use here, at least here in Missouri, of what's called a beneficiary deed. What's interesting about a beneficiary deed, for example, my mother, her properties are in a beneficiary deed with my sisters and myself named as beneficiaries. So what's great about a beneficiary deed is that children don't have any control on the property. In fact, I'm closing on a piece of property tomorrow. By the way, yes, I'm still an active real estate broker in the trenches. I go out and get listings and sell property and work with buyers and sellers. And I'm having a closing tomorrow. Thank you, Lord. Having a closing tomorrow. And my daughter and I, she's helping me with my real estate practice. And it's an elderly couple. And one of the things they wanted to do when we wrote the contract is they said, I'd like to have our children put on the deed. Well, they've got like 4 or 5 children. and they're all married. And I said to them, the problem we run into if we put them on the deed is that when you go to sell, or if you, let's just say they want to sell this property and maybe go into a nursing home or assisted living, they've got to get all those children's signatures, and the title company is going to want the spouses to sign as well. Well, I've been selling real estate for 40 years, and I'm here to tell you I've seen this over and over and over again, and there's always one of the children who's in the middle of a nasty, mean, ugly divorce, and the other person is just trying to be ornery and doesn't want to come over and sign the deed. I've seen it over and over and over again. In fact, I've seen sometimes where the kids have gotten mad at mom or dad and haven't talked to them for 6 years. And when I say the title company wants your son to sign the property or the daughter, and they're like, we haven't talked to him for 6 years and there's no way they're going to probably sign the deed. It just happens. It's unfortunate, it's sad, but it happens. So I told this couple that we're closing with tomorrow, I said, what we can do is a beneficiary deed. And in this example, with a beneficiary deed, the mom and dad can sell the property at any time. They don't need the kid's signature. The mom and dad could go get a loan on the property if they wanted to, don't need the kid's signature. The only time the kids come into play are as beneficiaries, okay, when mom and dad die. Then it goes to them, totally avoids probate. It's a great way to have your property vested. So if they offer that in your state, I know they offer it here in Missouri, you ought to talk to your parents about setting that up, because it will save a lot of time, a lot of headache, and allow you to sell the property much quicker. I'm selling some property for some clients, and I can't list it until June 25th because it's tied up in probate, and the house has been empty for probably 6 or 7 months. So it's a great way to do that. Before beneficiary deeds, we had what's called life estates, as you see in your book. And I just want to kind of draw out what a life estate might look like. So I'm going to put in this first example, this is mom and dad. I guess we think of moms first, so that's why I put mom first and dad. And they own this house, so they own some real estate. And let's just say it's a farm. Maybe it's a 40-acre farm, okay? And so now they have a son. We'll call this person Larry. And Larry's the son, okay? Now they also have a daughter, and we'll call her Susie. So she's the daughter. So what mom and dad want to do with this real estate is they want to grant a life estate, I'm going to abbreviate that, life estate to Larry. Okay? So Larry is called the life tenant. Okay? Now, in this example, they're going to name Susie as the remainderman. And I'm going to have to put a little hyphen there, but it's all one word, remainderman. So here's what happens. Mom and dad are considered or called the grantors, okay? They grant, they're signing a deed, it's a life estate to Larry. Larry now becomes the life tenant. Whenever Larry dies, okay, so if Larry was to die, unfortunately, Larry passes away. At that point, the farm goes to Susie, who is named as the remainderman. Okay? So you see these questions, and I have several of them in your course material that, Susie has a real estate after Larry dies with a life estate. What does she now have? She has fee simple ownership, right? Here's what happens with a life estate. Mom and Dad grant the life estate to Larry based on Larry's life. When Larry dies, it goes to Susie. They want to keep it in the family, right? They could have said, there could have been no remainderman even mentioned in this example. And when Larry dies, it reverts back to Mom and Dad. See that? So you could have a life estate that reverts back. Hey, Larry, our son, we want you to have the farm. It's yours, but we want to set this up so that if for some reason you were to die, heaven forbid, we want the farm to come back to us. We don't want Larry leaving it to his, heirs. We're saying, son, you can have it and use it while you're alive, but if something ever happens to you, it reverts back to us. They could also have a remainderman. Now, you could also have a situation like this. You could have the life estate that's based on Dad's life. In this case, we have what's called pour atrevet, and I'm going to abbreviate that. It's in your notes, pour atrevet or pour atrevet. They took phonics out of school when I was a kid, and I've been forever taunted my whole life. So I wanted to be a disc jockey. And I remember back in the early 1980s, I was working at a radio station in Fredericktown, and I said, and that's James Taylor up on a rough. And the program director came in and said, did you just say rough? And I said, I meant to say roof, I'm sorry. Anyway, it's late in the evening, and I'm just trying to keep you awake to have some fun, right? So pour atrevet, it's based on someone else's life. In other words, Mom and Dad give this to Larry, the son. He's a life tenant, but it's based on Dad's life. If Dad dies, we want the property to come back to Mom because she's going to need to probably sell that and get the income off of it. So you can have all of these different scenarios with a life estate. Now, here's what's interesting, and it's in your notes. Larry's the life tenant. Larry could sell the property. Larry could take a loan out on the property. Larry could rent the property. Larry can do just about anything he wants to do with the property. But when Dad dies, guess what happens to the property? It goes back to Mom. Or when we have the remainderment, when Larry dies, it goes to the remainderment. Some people always say to me, why would someone want to buy a life estate? Knowing that once Larry died, or if it's based on someone else's life, if they die, they lose the property. And my answer is, I don't know. Why do people go to Las Vegas and gamble lots of money? I guess if you could buy that for a low enough off, price, and it had some income with it, maybe it would be worth purchasing or living there for a certain length of time. But just understand the life tenant can sell it, can rent it, can do whatever really they want to do with it. But once that person's death happens, whether it's Larry or if it's based on someone else's, it's either going to go to the remainderman, or it's going to revert back to the owner, or it will revert back to the person that we named whose life it's based on. So if it's based on Dad's life, in this case, it comes back to Mom. I mean, you could have a life tenant where you could say when Dad dies, it reverts to Susie, the remainderman. So just understand who the players are, understand the terminology, and understand that, and when this life estate's over with, then the new owner has what's called fee simple title, right? Nothing could could interfere or obstruct their title. So there will be some questions on the exam about that. Just mark that down. I promise you, you will see some questions about life estate, and you need to understand the various players, and you need to understand the terminology, and you need to work through these and be familiar with what happens in each situation. So we'll come back over here. Looks like I don't know if we're still on or not. It looks like maybe I could have lost the signal, but we'll hope that we're still broadcasting on the air. It's showing it's live and recording, so I hope that's happening. Okay, so I'm recording this, and hopefully I'll still, if there was a problem, we'll get this loaded up so everybody can watch that. All right, so we also have some legal life estates, and we have what's called the dower, is the legal life estate a wife has when her husband dies. And we have what's called courtesy, is the legal life estate a husband has when his wife passes away. So I would definitely know both of those two terms right there. So make sure you understand that. One other thing here, and I'd make sure that I understood this part right here. If a spouse dies and you can no longer afford to pay your mortgage payments or taxes, could you lose the property? And the answer is yes, you could. Now, here's the one item you need to make sure you understand and know regarding situations when a spouse passes away. Unsecured creditors, credit card companies, anybody who does not have a security in your house, if you fail to make those payments, they could not take your house from you, okay? So just keep that in mind, that as long as you're making your house payment and any type of payments that you have a security for the property, you've got to keep making those payments. You know, you have to pay your taxes, you have to make your house payment. But if for some reason a spouse passes away and you can't afford to pay your MasterCard or Visa, they couldn't come in and take your house. And that's part of the homestead exemptions that you see up above there. So make sure you understand that. Okay, and then we get into some definitions, and that pretty much wraps up chapter 3. So kind of keep that information in mind there. I want to move over here to some test questions very quickly. And I'm going to just make a quick look out here and just see if we are still broadcasting live or if I've lost the connection. And looks like I'm offline right now, so I apologize about that. But I am recording this, so I'm going to upload that to the website, and we'll get that up there as soon as we can. So I don't know what the problem is there. I really I hate that, because we were kind of going along pretty good there, and then we lost our connection. So I hate that, and I apologize, but we will have this recorded and we'll get it put up online for you. So it shows it's recording here, so I'm just going to keep moving through the material, and we'll take a look at this right here. So I have some questions up, and I just want to kind of go over a few of these with you, and we'll take a look at these together. The first question is, a 16-year-old purchased a duplex and later decided to back out of the deal and get his money back. This legal action is called, what is this called here, do you think? You think it's called constructive revocation? Is it regression? How about reversion? Or would it be rescission? D, rescission. The legal action is called reversion. It would be reversion. They could back out. So the answer is C. And I'm going to be putting these in your course notes, so in your course content, so don't worry about that. But the correct answer is C, reversion. Number 2, an agreement for a sale contract has been signed. Which of the following terms best describes the type and status of the contract? Would this be a unilateral executory contract, a bilateral executory contract, bilateral executed, or unilateral executed? Now read this question again. An agreement for sale contract has been signed. Which of the following terms best describes the type and status of this contract? Well, we know it's a bilateral contract. Is it executory or executed? Remember, executed means it's finished. Executory means something's still lacking. Well, they've only signed the contract. They haven't closed, so it's still lacking. So the correct answer is B as in boy. Number 3, which of the following best describes a sales contract signed under duress? Which of the following best describes a sales contract signed under duress? Is it discharged, void, breached, or voidable? It is voidable. That's right. If you're under duress and you sign a contract, you would have the right to void the contract. So it would be voidable. Number 4, a seller and a buyer agreed on the price and terms on the sale of a house. Both seller and buyer signed the sales contract. Before the seller and buyer agreed to change the closing date, which of the following would both parties need to sign? And the answer is an addendum. If you're going to change the closing date, you're going to need to add an addendum. C is the best answer there. Number 5, when can a counteroffer be withdrawn? When can a counteroffer be withdrawn? And the answer is D, as in Donald, before the counteroffer is accepted. D as in Donald. Number 6, Falk gives Murphy an option to buy his farm within the next year for $500,000. Murphy agrees to pay $10,000 for the option. Regarding the transaction, which of the following is correct? A says if Murphy does not exercise this option, Falk must return the option money. Well, let's go back up and read the question again. Falk gives Murphy an option to buy his farm within the next year for $500,000. Murphy agrees to pay $10,000 for the option. Regarding this transaction, which of the following is correct? Well, if Murphy does not exercise this option, Falk must return the option money? No, that's not correct. Remember, I don't have to buy on an option, but if I don't buy, I lose my money. So A is incorrect. B, Falk is the optionee. I like to remember that the seller, in this case Falk, is the optionor. I think that's right, but let's move on. I could be wrong there. C, Murphy does not have the right to use the property during the option year. That's probably correct. But let's read D. If Murphy exercises his option, the $10,000 will automatically be applied to the purchase price. So that sounds pretty good, but the answer is C. Murphy does not have the right to use the property during the option year. D, read that again. If Murphy exercises his option, the $10,000 will automatically be applied to the purchase price. We don't know that if that's automatic, so we can't go with that question or not, answer or not. A couple of more, and then we're going to wrap it up here for tonight since I'm not actually broadcasting. I'm kind of broadcasting, but I'm not. 7, when is a purchaser said to have equitable title? And the answer is A, at the signing of the sales contract by both the buyer and the seller. 8, a seller finances a property, but the seller holds the deed until the final payment is made. What type of contract is this? That would be an installment sales contract. B, it's a land contract. And 2 more. 9, which of the following circumstances may a seller usually keep the earnest money deposit of a defaulting buyer? Well, the correct answer is A. If the seller wants to declare the sales contract forfeited and there is a forfeiture clause in the contract. And the last one, 10, that we'll go over tonight, liquidated damages refers to what? Well, it refers to A, a buyer defaults on a contract and loses all earnest monies paid. Well, I apologize that we lost our video feed, but I hit the record button just to go on and try to see what happened. I think I can take this video recording, upload it to YouTube, and I'll send everybody the link. So keep studying hard. We'll try another session next week, and hopefully we won't lose contact with the server, but I will I'm always around if you need any help, and I want to say thanks for your business, and just keep studying very hard. You're going to do fine. Thanks again. Have a great evening.